Welcome everyone to this very special event put on by the University of Chicago. It's called the Distinguished Speakers Series, and I want to give a special welcome to our distinguished alumni, family, and friends of the University of Chicago who all decided to come here on this very beautiful night to join us for what I think will be a very interesting and exciting discussion. For those who don't know me, my name is Tobias Schweitzer. I am not Chilean, but I graduated from the college in 1999, and I'm a student at the Universidad Católica in the Programa de Magister in Economía. I see some of my professors here, so I hope that will reflect well on my grades, and the others here too. Okay. And I'm also one of many members of the alumni club who helped to work very hard over many months to put this event together and gather all of us here. Tonight is a very special evening for many reasons. We have gathered, we're here because of the strong bond of affection that we feel towards the University of Chicago because of our experiences that we had, whether it was for 1 year, for 4, or for 7. This event is titled the Phoenix Rising, The Way Ahead for Chile, A Chicago Perspective. And it's really the result of came together as a result of a conversation I had over a cup of coffee with Maria Santander, one of my colleagues. Last year, our alumni club hosted many events, which a lot of you came to, including hosting Dean Hansen, a couple of professors from the astrophysics department, as well as Dean Snyder from Booth School of Business. And all these events were very well attended. A lot of enthusiasm was generated from them, and that gave us the hint that we need to do more, and we need to do more that is led by our alumni. And so we were looking for a way to continue that momentum and put together an alumni-led and planned event that would touch on the topic that all of us right now feel very passionately about: Chilean football and United States football. Chile's future. Chile has a very bright future, but as some of our speakers will talk about, feel like things have been led astray, and we'd like to get back on track. So they're going to discuss that tonight. We brought together 4 panelists for the diverse backgrounds in law, economics, politics, business, to give their perspectives and some concrete policy prescriptions they have for Chile for us to weigh and consider tonight. Before I go any further, I need to recognize the wonderful people in the Alumni Club who have put a lot of time and effort into this event to make it happen. So if you would mind raise your hands. I see you, Armando Borda, Rodrigo, and Patricia's not with us tonight, but Hugo and Andres and Maria, thank you so much for your help. We need to give them a round of applause and thank them. The format for tonight will be as follows. Our moderator, who is serving double duty as also a panel member as well, will speak first, and he will in turn introduce each of the panel members. They'll speak each for a few minutes on this topic from their perspective and their point of view, and the moderator will lead a discussion of the ideas put forth, and each panel member will have the chance to respond as well. We'll have time for questions from the audience. We have a microphone, and at that appropriate time we'll pass that around. If you have any comments or questions you would like to ask the panel, there'll be plenty of time for that. Tonight also, part of the focus of the club is to recruit young students to come to Chicago and continue our strong tradition. So let me take 1 minute to help put in perspective what the Chicago experience is all about and why this is important and why we all came tonight to share this. If any visitor that comes to the campus is going to notice pretty quickly that this school is different. The students are different. They're even a little weird. In other school, you'll see students wearing T-shirts of their favorite school football team, and we wear T-shirts that say University of Chicago, where fun comes to die. We wear T-shirts that list our 85 Nobel Prize-winning faculty and students who have passed through the university. And if you see students protesting on the quads, it's not because of globalization or free trade. It's because they're protesting because the library is not open late enough for them to study, or the university is trying to make the curriculum less demanding or less rigorous. And just note, a few years ago, the administration capitulated to the students' demands and opened a 24-hour study space at the Regenstein Library for them. So the university does listen to their students. So what do we make of that behavior? Why were people so fanatical about the University of Chicago in ways that manifest itself like that? I think there are two things that account for this. People come to Chicago to seek knowledge and truth. And to be absolutely clear, Chicago has no book, no person, no doctrine, no system of beliefs which contain the answers to all our questions. If you get 3 Chicago graduates together, you'll have at least 5 opinions on any topic. But people come to Chicago to work together, to push each other, and to be challenged. Chicago offers a rich intellectual environment, teaches critical thinking, and leaves us to take up our own journey. There is really only one rule at Chicago, and I know everyone agrees with this. All dogma must be left behind, all assumptions must be challenged, all methods must be reviewed, and all conclusions must be scrutinized. Your name, your title, your previous work gives you no deference with your peers when it comes to intellectual matters. And remember, this is the university that refused to grant Queen Elizabeth of England an honorary doctorate because of her lack of scholarly work. So we know, aside from revelation, the only hope we have of reaching truth is by subjecting ideas to rigorous critical thinking. The second thing that explains our Chicago pride and that the Chicago community holds is that we understand that ideas matter. They matter a lot. While it may seem tedious to argue over fine points on macroeconomic policy, we know that raising GDP growth by 0.5% will lift thousands of people out of poverty. We know that a poorly designed government program to do something simple can destroy a market and leave people without any of the good. So these things matter, and this is why Chicago students and faculty work so hard. They know they have perhaps one opportunity in their lifetime to make a difference, to get it right the first time. One of our intellectual heroes who embodies Chicago's commitment to truth and the power and the force of ideas, sits with us here tonight. We're immensely proud of his achievements, and they serve as an inspiration to us. At this time, I would like to ask Mr. Sergio de Castro, one of the founding fathers of the Chicago Boys, and an intellectual hero to us, to please come forward to introduce the theme of tonight's topic and to introduce the monitor. Thank you.
I regret to inform you that Christian Laroulette, unfortunately, will not be able to come here to receive the Professional Achievement Award of 2010, which he was awarded by this organization. His fundamental role in public policies and the economic transformation in Chile through Libertad y Desarrollo is the basis for this award. There's no doubt that Libertad y Desarrollo is one of the most prestigious think tanks in Latin America. And Christian was not only one of the creators, but also was its director until a very short time ago. We regret not to be able to tribute him our admiration and love. I've been told to remember Chicago and tell you something about my experience as a student and introduce our moderator for the subject today. All this in less than 5 minutes. In Chicago, we learned economics, and we acquired what's the essence of their School of Economics, the rigorous logical analysis. We also learn the importance of hard work. A lot of hours of study every day of the week, and all the weeks of the month. All this for 2 years. Another important teaching was the teamwork. We shared notes, and after completing the enormous mandatory lists, we got together to understand the most complicated issues and understand them well. Einstein was right when saying that success is 90% sweat and 10% inspiration. A lot of water has gone under the bridges since October 1958. in the Universidad Católica Business School. The following year, a fourth graduate arrived. Then the commitment of the dean of hiring 4 full-time professors. Now the contract between the University of Chicago and the fourth punto cuarto of the government of the United States to finance the project of 4 standing teachers in the Universidad Católica. Now the full-time professors were 10, and on 95 they raised to 40. 20 of them from the Economics Institute, and the other 20 from the School of Management. On 1995, more than 15 years ago, he was our dear friend Francisco Rosende was chosen as a dean. Francisco is a commercial engineer from the University of Chile, and he got his master's degree in Chicago in 96. He started teaching in the Universidad Católica in 1984. He was director of studies of the Central Bank between 1985 and 1990, and he was member of the Antitrust Commission or Bureau between 1999 and 2001. He's written several books, including a textbook entitled Macroeconomic Theory. He's published 65 articles in specialized magazines or journals. His enormous theoretical knowledge and his analytic and practical work in the central bank and in the university have made him a certain analyst, an accurate analyst of the current business situation. We are always waiting for his monthly columns in the El Mercurio newspaper about the economic challenges Chile has to meet. His passage by the faculty has been deep. With his inclusive leadership, with the directors of management school, that's how we resolve the tasks. The Magister in Economics, with more than 35 years of experience, has continued developing and has enormous international prestige. Since 2006, the Applied Economics master's degree is working, and now we have a doctorate in economics, which attracts students from foreign countries, and we have 7 doctorates now. The Business Management School has 3 magisters, one in finances, another one in business management sciences, and another one in strategic direction of human resources and organizational behavior. We have to mention that some time ago we materialized a new modern building across the South Santa Lucia for this postgraduate studies. The institute and the school show up consistently in the first places of excellence in Latin America in the most prestigious rankings in the world. Between last year and current year, the university has hired 14 professionals, very young professionals, all PhDs. Now, the faculty is 52 full-time professors, 30 of them in management business, of which 25 are PhDs, and 22 in the Economics Institute, of which 18 are PhDs. Francisco has pressed and emphasized excellence research and publications and publishing. It is doubtless that the faculty gathers the best research and teaching body of the universities in Chile. This implies that the best students in the country choose it to study economics and business management. We have generated a lot of academic exchange with universities around the world. This flow of teachers and students from abroad improves the prestige of our university. It's an honor having introduced our moderator, Dean Professor Francisco Rosende, for whom I request a big round of applause.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Sergio.
Thank you very much, Sergio. Well, I'd like to start off by thanking the University of Chicago, especially Ryan Olson, for this initiative in creating a club of ex-alumni to get together, to discover, to analyze without any court or test. And this means that it's a very informal occasion. Historically, we have left these ideas and coordinations to get together, and this means that this support that Ryan has given us and the University of Chicago is very valuable, and we thank you for it. Now, starting off with these activities, I believe that we should focus the need to examine what the influence of Chicago has been in Chile and what type of discussion Chicago could focus and could be present in the future of Chile. In fact, one of the most noteworthy elements in any analysis is the influence the university has had in the economical history of this country, something which has been widely recognized, and the results of it has also been widely recognized. When the Chicago University Catholic Agreement was signed and they had certain policies, the ideas that the professors had brought over that had studied in that university knew that these ideas were revolutionary. The difference is that what happened in Chicago's is that they taught the political implicancies that were seen throughout the world, and this was huge. In this aspect, it was noteworthy that in a small country such as this, we started discussing things that seemed to be so far away from the known methods. In fact, beyond industrialized economies, talking about free companies, monetary controls, etc. In this context, it was more of a trailblazing than something that was already well known. In fact, today, the differences that you could find in economy, business, public policies, the School of Law in Chicago is less than you could find in other great and well-known academic centers. It would seem that the focal point has brought over and has placed issues in debate that we thought we had overcome. This meant that having this type of economy, a market economy which is intrinsically unstable, this is already in discussion once again. We are discussing if the system is being balanced or if it's going through a disbalance, and if we need a strong hand on behalf of the state to control the economic activities. We're also talking about the fact if a free market open to the exterior is an economy that promotes the unevenness of distribution of wealth. Starting from that point, we have to know how labor markets work, how the labor markets relate to the institutionalities of the countries. These things were something that set Chicago apart, and it seems that throughout the passage of time, these gaps grew greater. But now we're around the same point. If you look at the journals, for example, the hypotheses of efficient markets, the idea is being questioned. And depending on how the world economy goes, how the world reacts and relates to the political systems, to how it reacts to its political and financial crisis, we could have other issues arise. And in that aspect, something that seemed to be a convergence, today we see it in the blogs and the newspapers, has shown great divergencies. That's where we see Cochrane and Coogan's different policies. We have, for example, Lucas versus Posner. This has been something similar to the controversy between Friedman and Molinari. So, coming back together, coming back to discuss and create an exact analysis for knowledge is something that we've learned from our life experience, and it seems to be most advantageous to carry out so now more than ever. So what can we do in Chile? We can do a lot. I believe that the institution here in our country, established by the first Chicago boys, were basically sustained on the idea that the markets can be efficient under an adequate institutional framework, and that the people will respond to incentives, that an open economy is more efficient than a closed economy. All of this seems to be assimilated. It seems that in many senses the great battles we had in the past had been overcome, and at one time what seemed to be a minority position, more of a trailblazing position, was widely accepted. But there's still questions. There's still questions that we're debating day by day. It depends on the focus on the great political problems. For example, if we're talking about education, there's always going to be a debate of how we're going to solve the problems, whether it's more we're going to solve them with more fiscal spending or other solutions. If we try to define the correct political financial strategy, if we're going to debate on the classical procedures that Mr. Arnold Harvard taught us, or if we're going to establish the associated triangles to each political project, then we're going to use other criteria. Now, once again, the idea is to see, for example, if the distribution of wealth is uneven or if these are inherent failures in the market. And that's part of discussions. Within our political public agenda, we see growth as a central subject, and growth has the vision we have on how markets work and what the efficiencies on public policies are and should have to solve the problems. It would seem that the dynamicism in other countries have to do with the bike theory. This country is reproposing its ideas in order to solve social problems that's not going to enter into a dynamic where it's going to destabilize itself. And in that sense, I believe it's important to come together and discuss the future of the country. And in that sense, I believe that the panel that we're going to carry out today is a great starting point for many activities we hope to carry out in the next few months, where we're going to rediscuss, reopen ideas starting from the greatest principles, financial policies, economical rights, etc., what we can do to have a better performance. And just as our founding fathers carried out and they finally won the intellectual battle, well, as Buyama said, it seems the end of history is repeating itself. Chicago, the University of Chicago has a lot to say, and it's in the mind of everybody. Now, to talk about these ideas, I'd like to present the panel. To my left, we have Francisco Perez, who has an MBA from the university, and he has had a very great success in the company level. We have Mr. Viñanco, who administers the business school of the Universidad Católica. We have Mr. Devalu. He was also a politician. And finally, we have, Ernesto Silva, who is a politician, and Jorge Fábrega, who is part of the School of Government from the University of Adolfo Ibáñez, and has studied in the University of Chicago as well. Each one of the speakers is going to have 5 minutes to talk, and then we can ask questions, and then we could ask the university questions about the subjects they have proposed, and then we could have the closing remarks. So following the order, I offer the floor to Francisco Perez. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the University of Chicago and all of you for being here today, and so that we could have a great club form out of this meeting, and we should get together more often with more objectives. Now, with the professors that taught me the little I know a lot more than I do, so you know more than I do. Now, I'd like to talk about what my friend Francisco Resenda just mentioned, the theory of the bike, or the bicycle theory. Now, we could give it a lot of exceptions and exceptions. We know a lot of type of bikes, but basically I just want to briefly refer to growth, because I understand that the idea here is to talk about what happens with Chile after the earthquake. First off, I'd like to say that growth is the exception and not the rule, or in the history of man. It's more than 2.6 million years of history. The first species didn't grow at all. Homo sapiens had the first opportunity to grow, and this has been the last 200,000 years. Now, if we look at economical history, you could see that 5,000 before the Common Era, the growth rate was less than 1% per year, and the per capita was calculated in $130. 1,500 of the Common Era is $175, and after the 1900s, it has been more than that. That means that man has needed 7,000 years to grow in GDP. Now, the bike theory means that growing is hard; it's not easy. In 1800s, this has changed with the Industrial Revolution, and the GDP grew to $1,500. What happened? Well, basically two things happened. The technological change, which made the resources less, and the increase of the standard of life, which increased fertility. These, I believe, are the most important reasons for which man discovered growth just in the 1800s after the Common Era. Now, with a bit of information of the U.S., in 1960 and 1970, the U.S. grew 5% per year. In 1970, it grew 1.6%. So, please notice that in 1935, it fell to 73.95. What happened is that basically we have a restriction in resources, which has been translated into the use of primary resources such as oil. We had the baby boomers, which incorporated a great non-educated mass of workers to the workforce. Now, when we look at the details, the conclusions you can reach is that, well, it's the opposite that from what you hear every day, that the main source of growth has been the advancement of knowledge. Basically, what we could call, with Douglas's theories, the technological change. 3.1% of increase in product in the GDP in the 20th century. 34% is explained by the technological change. 16% by a better human capital or education. 12% is an improvement in physical capital, and other percentages which include improvement in resources. But the key here is the change in technology or knowledge, and this is an issue which is basically beyond the tools we manage today, and in one way or another it's absent in the public policies, not education, but basically human capital. This particular point, which is related to education, isn't the same as looking at it from another point of view. This is a huge challenge for us, and I see that Claudio Sabelia, just a few years ago, I had to work with him and Francisco in a panel about growth, and Claudio told us back then that our level of education is measured by the test results. Basically, we obtain half of what we should have due to development. A sigma in better performance means that it's 1% growth per year for a country. Education is key, and we have a huge lack of education. Also, there's a lack of institutions, which was another issue that Francisco talked about in that presentation. Institutions have to do not with the buildings or the organizations that carry out the issues in the different states. No, basically it's with the procedures and regulations and ethics, which is focused on maximizing the principles and the riches, that people don't run away with the riches, but that they work and comply with the contracts they have been hired for. So if we look at a greater risk of expropriation due to any type of source, obviously there's less investment and less growth. And here we have the tax issues, not the taxes of now, but the taxes of the future. What are the key points? And I'm going to wrap up with this. Basically, if we want a technological change, if we want to produce this change, we need human capital investment, because many of the increments in knowledge come with machines. When you buy a new machine, you change the productive processes, and that means that you're going to incorporate a better technology. It's also strategic associations, globalization, foreign investment to bring over and learn this knowledge that is from abroad. Also research and development, reassignment, labor flexibility, expectations, traveling. You have to know the world. You have to stimulate the gap between the expected wages and the current wages, and obviously using more efficient technologies up until the appreciation. This is probably the issues we're going to discuss at the rest of the presentation. Thank you very much, Francisco. Ernesto, your turn.
Bien, gracias. Yo diría que si bien se decía que esto no es un examen, es lo más parecido.
They were telling me that this is not an exam, but it's something really related to it, even if I don't have a grade, when I have this kind of audience to be able to talk here. First, I want to acknowledge Christian Laroulet. I think it's all the alumni are should be very proud to about what he's doing. He has gathered a lot of things which have defined Chicago, which is influence, constant improvement, constant in time. And I want to say that in my case, it's a lot of I'm enthusiastic about sharing here, and in part, I went to Chicago due to what I saw in my father, who was also an alumni of Chicago, and what I saw that they were part of a group. That's what I saw there. There's a shared vision, a shared view for Chile in economics. And I think there was a drive which trespassed time, went along forming teams, and that was valuable. Now, from my personal point of view, Chicago was very difficult because I'm a lawyer, and I went to study public policy and a lot of economics, and in a way I had to learn to think different, and it was very useful because for my activity, because that's what I wanted to do, was politics, and I think it was a very good compliment. Now that I've entered politics, I want to share my view, my point of view from the political point of view to this Chicago discussion. I'm going to share very few comments, and I want to tell you that Chile changed, and the renewal cannot wait, and it cannot wait for Chicago University or the leaderships. It's a new scenario demand. I want to give you 3 examples in terms of, for example, of opportunity. How the first 5 quintiles, the 3 first quintiles have changed in their access to education. This is very strong, and it's going to keep on changing. Now, the other one is how generations are changing, and this is more cultural. We have a lot of examples. Young people trust less. There you have the different institutions, the political parties, the police, financial institutions, the pension funds. The young people trust less, and we see this on respect for others. There's a change in society, and this demands new points of view for the problem. And that's the competitivity of the IMD published this year. Chile fell 3 ratings, and it had improved. But remember that Chile is in a different scenario, and the competitivity of the state needs a different point of view. And the university has been influential in forming leaders for the surroundings. Have to supply a core which has to do with analytical rigor, and to extracting conclusions from the life, and to be able to be worthy of extracting context for this surroundings. And you can also look at it from a generational point of view. In the 70s, there was a generation that faced an institutional crisis. Society was tense. You needed to have certain leadership abilities, maybe to be more extremist. And in the 90s, we needed a political transition, even though we still have the discussions that Francisco stated in a different way. Therefore, there were other abilities required for that environment. And now we require generations to be able to advance and face other different transitions, more political and advance towards the opportunity. And this has been in the public discussion from the point of view I've been stating in the presidential campaign, for example. And this new transition of this new Chile, I would say that it goes from a logic for a society that has been advancing in the last years towards a logic of protection, and it turns towards a promotion, opportunities towards people, and a society where its social composition or their dreams, because we don't use this, their aspirations have changed, their goals have changed. People have other goals, they have access to other goods, they expect other things for their children, they distribute the work and the rest different. We have turned into a very globalized society, and that generates a demand. And in that sense, I think that the University of Chicago has had, as you stated, for more than 50 or 60 years, a great influence in Chile, and I think it has to be influential in the future. And since we have questions for ourselves, there are also questions towards the university. How do you project your view towards the world, towards Latin America? How do you encourage the advance of public policies? And there's some thoughts I want to encourage. First is to construct networks and support the renewal of leadership. This requires to assemble teams and networks, not work by yourselves. I think the university, and here the deans and the faculty have to form nuclei that go to the university, not only individuals, to be able to generate networks. Second, we've all talked a lot about economics and the economic formation, and also the university has been diversifying the students with different disciplines been receiving from Chile towards multi-sectoral problems, and I think that more multidisciplinary work is required. Also, to have different points of view, which could be also very useful. There are people who are very important in the program drafting, and they've done it from the Universidad Católica and other projects, but the Catholic University. But the University of Chicago has to define if they're going to be supplying the drafting of programs in Chile, as other institutions are doing this. I understand that the Catholic University is doing this, and there's also a question you have to ask yourself. I think that the main focus has to be on trying to interpret the needs as it was done looking 50 years ahead, 50 years ago. I think we have to repeat what Francisco said in the human asset area, and when we have better human assets, the country will advance. We have to strengthen the rules or the playing board to make things work, and we have to still have a task pending there. And the last one, it seems have been neglected, which is the capacity to entrepreneur and respond. Thank you very much. First, I would like to say thanks. Well, the good thing about being the last one is that I don't have to repeat them. So I want to thank the University of Chicago and all the people who are coordinating this meeting for the initiative. I hope this is not just a beginning, but we can extract lots of good things for Chile from here. I want to comment just one thing, which is a doubt I have of how to improve public policies in our country, or government policies in our country. And in that, using as a starting point, it was like what's coming out next after the earthquake. Let's remember what happened after the earthquake, where we had a large discoordination and the systems failed. But what worked was the decentralized initiative, the spontaneous initiative of the people trying to find their loved ones, and that's where the alarm system failed, or the people who had access for text messages, for example, were able to communicate through the social networks which are based on that, and use this to think how you can manage public policies and how we can advance in this. And I'll go a step backwards now, because in times of globalization and uncertainty, we are used to ask the government more than that they can actually supply. And the government, the people who are in charge of public functions, they offer to us more than they should, or they're not able to comply with this. And this ties our hands, because they will never be able to actually fulfill their promises. And they have a lot of visibility, and it's criticized with a very high opportunity cost. For example, they could satisfy salaries, for example, and this ends up going sour because they cannot do it, and then discourages people to work in public policies, because there's an inverse incentive. And a lot of people start preaching, for example, in that area, like Ernesto mentioned, that other people have other goals and they don't feel the need to take part actively in public policies. And that's a challenge for the government, because they don't control the variables which affect the public policies which they draft, and sometimes they cannot attract the needed human assets to be able to conduct the public policies. So what does this teach us? What happened after the earthquake? I think that the lesson of the question for the managers of the public policies is how to be able to channel the energies unleashed, looking for cooperation, people who want to look for solutions. And how is this done? And like Ernesto said, this is done creating networks. I remember Professor Ronald Barth from the Business School of the University of Chicago, when they gave us the key concept that government has to be a mediator, a broker, which generates social assets, who helps the citizens to change and transform in not public policy objects, but public policy subjects. And putting on the table how this can be done, we have achieved a great advance, setting a baseline in the access to information with the law of access to information here in Chile. And, for example, all the information generated by the government is public, and we have to make it accessible, not only for accountability, but also for management. How can we do this? Well, the government supplies the information and the databases to the population. Researchers can generate knowledge, developers can develop solutions or softwares for this. The citizens can become fire alarms to improve accountability, and the taxpayers will be able to improve the knowledge about how can you generate, for example, good financing for the public works with their taxes. Therefore, to finish, what I'm saying, this is not something for the future. It is something that has to be done now. This is not a technological issue. It's a political problem. It is not technological, and I invite you to write data.com at your smartphones. It's been done for 13 months in the United States. The government of the United States supplied 47 databases to this portal, and now they have more than 20,000 databases, because that generates creativity in the population to generate solutions for people who have questions. And why doesn't somebody do this? For example, I don't want to work in the government, but I can do this. Therefore, I can develop a solution, and then you can upload it, and you will see solutions built by their citizens and the public policy. And there's also data.co.uk starting in England. This is a political issue, because we still live in a logic that the centralized information is power. Therefore, I don't share it. In my area, I have requested some databases from other researchers, and they will not share them. This is a mistake. Now, individual incentives are to do this because you have a monopoly, a trust on information. And this has to be a political decision that the government, from the maximum authorities, give us access to us as citizens, the ability to make of that information something useful. If that had been available, maybe some people would have not died after the earthquake. There's an additional change we have to achieve. And this is a cultural look. We still look at the government as a father figure. With the strategy of this government for the last years, it's still a proposal that sees what proposes is that I'm going to integrate my systems to make them more visible for the population. But they don't integrate the population to improving public policies. And I want to finish with one last thought. The government, the state, is not able to give us, to supply us with what it promises. The state has to be a mediator in between ourselves. And as it has been commented here, the first it has to be like something the first Chicago student brought to Chile. And this means that we don't have to trust only in a centralized optic or view, but allow the individuals to surface. I am an optimist, and I think this will happen in Chile, but it's also a call upon the authorities to begin with this as soon as possible. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jorge. According to the schedule or agenda, I have to give supply the first open dialogue session with a topic. I want to tell Francisco Perez, ask him, what's your point of view on innovation? And I state this in the following terms. One of the comments I remember from a teacher or professor in Chicago, when you had a lot of interventions on externalities, he said that eventually the externalities were the last resource. And normally we're talking about that in the public debate, we should have a stronger state intervention to subsidize innovation. In your argument, it stated innovation is an important element. What should be the focus of the public policies towards innovation? And I, of course, asked the same question to Ernesto and Jorge. Regarding institutions, I think that Chile has been characterized in the region as working for several decades to building an institutional framework where we could have said it was efficient. In the latest times, we have had inflation in the institutions. We do trust that we have a trust that creating institutions you solve problems. This, for example, the financial CERNAC or customer service agency, we could create more ministries. And this brings to my memory what Álvaro Bardón said, that we have problems in housing because we have a housing ministry. The comment, of course, was expectable. But the question I have is, what would the focus be for institutional design? Understanding its dynamic, should we evaluate or assess the efficiency of the institutional apparatus? Understanding that there is a progressive trend to develop new institutions, or thinking that these new institutions will solve social problems. I leave with you the questions, and then we will take questions from the audience.
Well, I have Professor Fontana on the front of us, who is going to subsidize innovation, and he's going to put a 2 on my note, or my grade, because, well, the truth is, I don't think this goes on the side of the subsidies, because the truth is, I believe that the value that's created has been privatized, has been captured by the person who creates it. These externalities, well, there are externalities, but more than having to do with subsidies, they have to do with regulations. And let me give you a few examples. Intellectual law or intellectual property. Chile isn't exactly the champion of intellectual property, and there's a negative fact because the person that invests in this innovation is going to capture that income, he has to be serious in pushing the respect to or of intellectual property, and this is something that can be done in Chile. We could invest more in this innovation. For example, B, taxes. The taxes, income tax, how much should income tax be? Maybe it'll be 20% soon. Today it's 17. Well, but it's not exactly true. It's 17, it's going to be 20 if you do well. But since not all projects are successful, we are going to end up paying 0 for the projects that you do badly, and not 17 for those that do well. Therefore, the taxes to your utility is actually a barrier for innovation. Maybe it's a cost that society has to pay to actually gather and be able to carry out company activities, but this is a barrier that creates a need for innovation. Now, when we see growth, it's not necessarily through innovation or through producing innovation, but we have to incorporate innovation to more companies, to more activities. This has to do with the factoring of companies. If I have an old company and I can't reassign it because people think that closing a company to free up resources is a bad policy, it's a bad human policy. Obviously, what I'm doing there is I'm locking down the capacity of those resources, those people, in being reassigned to industries where the coefficiency, as Douglas says, is more productive. And this, of course, is understanding innovation. I believe that there are tax issues with foreign investment. If we invest as a Chilean in abroad, and I'm talking from my own experience, I invested in a company in France. There is a huge, tricky tax system abroad, and maybe they are going to concentrate their investment in Chile. Maybe that's why the Chilean stock market is in its historical maximums when the rest of the world is in much below its maximum. So if we don't leave the country, we incorporate less technologies, less practices, which can be actually a barrier in the future. 80% of innovation has to be imported to Chile. So, we can't forget that probably 40% of the source of growth is technological change. And if we're not able to spread this in a complete manner, then we're going to stop growing. Should I go first? Yes. Well, I believe the first thing we have to remember that when we analyze a company, and that's the difference, when we analyze a company, we could say with certain simplification that the interests are aligned with the utilities and the income, but when we think about public policies, we have a multiple of factors with different objectives where all of them are important and nobody can be excluded. Therefore, the solution mechanism can't be carried out as if it's only one person acting rationally, but a collective vision. Now, that said, historically, we created new ministries, new formal rules and regulations, and that worked well in the measure that the other factors that affected the results were controlled. It worked well in a closed economy with high transactional costs. It's relatively well controlled, especially in innovations. Now, and I'd like to reiterate what was said before, in the highly globalized effect and the different factors that have a policy that's not controlled by the organization, while this type of solution creates more rigidity than a solution. So that's why I'll say it again. I believe that innovation from the institutional point of view goes through taking advantage of what we call the crowdsourcing, obtaining information from others that are outside the organization. And this can be done through the state, public organizations, and we could show what they have so that others can generate more solutions. I believe that innovation is going through that path, especially in the public sector. Now, with respect to the solutions, well, they're going to necessarily have to go through what was said before, which is carrying out an emphasis in their promotion, emphasis regarding the clients, the citizens, whatever the case may be, obtaining ideas and solutions that weren't designed beforehand. They emerge from this network of people. Now, I don't want to say any more because it seems that somebody else wants to add something. Well then, yes, I believe that Jorge mentioned this in some of it, but I believe that in institutional modification, I believe that we have to check the behavior once again. The same thing that applies to decision making in any economical agent, we have to measure political agents. I am one of them today, and in that sense, their logical is going to be maximization logic, and of course, their re-election and their influence is important. Therefore, this will have two types of behaviors. For example, maximizing the budget, and others have talked about the logic of widening the networks, making the stake grow. This idea is going to be here where you can't only talk about ethics to modify something. Maybe we could improve institutions. This is an important piece of information that we have to keep in mind. There's something that Jorge says about the collective networks, but something that happened in the 70s and the 80s can happen today. The transaction cost to change institutionally is different. All the problems we had in the 70s and 80s, well, we had a coherent plan which answered to an action line, a line of actions, and it allowed us to produce institutionality and changes according to a diagnosis. Today, we have to negotiate change, and sometimes it's not the best. At first, we require another type of negotiation scheme. Therefore, asking this question in the context when we have these type of problem, we have this difficulty or transactional cost to generate change, we have to use certain things that help. The first one is being transparent. As we generate more information of what the state is doing, good or bad, we're going to generate more expectations in citizen response, in, for example, when the institutions have problems or when they're larger than they should be. The second point is to transfer decision-making to the citizen. This is a debate that nobody touches much or dares to touch upon this, but we should, for example, talk about rehab for prisoners, etc. These are decisions that affect people, and advancing and walking this line, I believe that we could generate incentives to empower people, such as in assigning part of their taxes without having strong institutional changes. And the last one has to do with competition, and this is in the political sector. I believe that we have a pending task in introducing more competencies in policies and politics, because we're going to generate space for innovation in that issue and to create networks that can generate a capture of information. Now, for these institutional changes, literature throughout the countries talks about different methods. Some of them give a third party, a third entity beyond the incentives, whether it's good or bad. For example, white paper generation, the good idea generation is going to say that this is another bureaucracy. But in Chile, this has been done but by the private sector, and in the last decade it's been done twice. It was done by CEP 2002. I'd say it's been done more, but CEP did it 2002 simultaneously with the government's work after the Lagos crisis, and it carried out changes in public acquisitions, public policies. This institutional change analysis was carried out by the state consortium, and I believe that here we have the capacity of generating knowledge to advance the institutions. Thank you, Ernesto. We have a few questions for a Q&A session. If any activities are measured nor are they evaluated, nor are they compared. Therefore, there's a type of growing ideological sense that people believe that the solution resides having more state, more state, more state, because they've never had the opportunity of comparing what it's producing compared to what it's actually using. The idea is that we can touch upon this topic, since today we have people that use this idea in the government, and we could actually have real possibilities of talking about this. Thank you, Alfonso. We're going to fuse two questions together to save time. Francisco Masuo. Yes, this is also for all three of them. Just as the alumni club from Chicago, we're going to have one idea, which is having high impact and growth that would be politically feasible. Well, it has been carried. What would that idea be? That's a question for all three of you. All right, we'll take these two questions for now. Then, should I start? Well, in the issue of metas and meta projects, we analyzed a very interesting proposal in the compliance unit, which is something that is basically saying that instead of talking about use or the amount of police on the street, instead of talking about products, we're going to see how many more rounds the police needs. We should actually talk about results and how to lower delinquency in the next few months. I believe that there's a good experience in the world for this, and in Chile we've carried out, it tries to evaluate programs, and I believe in the last few years this has been very formal. We've been in a seminar talking about this, and I believe this can be very strong. Whatever you put beyond that, it could be focused on the results, on the institutional results. Now, this does have a restriction, and compared to the private organizations, we usually have two things happen, or that the process is observable, or that the policies are not observable. Now, this happens in literature as we change the focus more to the products. We are going to have a different story. Chile is going to use this institution that's being carried out
in a budgetary process. The experiences in other parts of the world is that there are problems because you generate independent compartments, and the ministers do not negotiate their budget with their agencies. They're going to purchase services, and they commit to promise to supply certain services or standards, and I think that's a relevant issue. Regarding a reform, I would modify the faculty law and the selection of directors, and maybe if we can buy it. If we can begin from scratch with the new ones today, and I would just directors, I will not only make them teachers, I would select them by abilities. I would give them a fixed salary depending on the vulnerability of the school, and I would give them result contracts for 3 years, and I think that would actually solve some problems.
En el tema de la evaluación de proyectos,
in project assessment, I would return Ernesto Fontaine the responsibility of training the public managers or government managers. In the growth agenda, I had the teaching law, but I would really decrease the size of the state and empower the people so they can assign their own, they make their own decisions. I think that the worst money is your money spent by someone else. I think that there's some discussion missing. What we want from our state, because we made it ourselves. Regarding assessment, those analyses are conducted. The PNG, the DGIs, there is an analysis, but we don't know about it, and I think that's a problem because we cannot get accountability for those analyses. If we had access to the information, we would have an answer. We would know that if the money is well spent. Well, the analysis are there, but the incentives of the goals of these programs are not well designed because they're designed by the same person who assesses them or evaluates the results. So it's like the person who finally has to assess or evaluate how the management was, since to avoid problems with the people who work with me, so I can't grade them as they deserve, because if not, they will actually mutiny. There's a mechanism to grade, to qualify this, but it's existent, but it's not correct. I would have reforms on education, but I would return the issue to Ernesto. There is an issue here which has no direct effect on the growth and the development, but it has a long-term effect. We could make the political system more competitive, where it motivates high productivity individuals to integrate to the state world. I think that today you don't have a system which is competitive enough. Maybe we could discuss that at a later stage, but that would have an enormous institutional effect in Chile. Thank you, Jorge. In a sense, I did not cover privatization in the agenda, but we'll leave it for later. We can take two more questions. Here we have two questions. Hello. Before anything, I want to introduce myself. I'm George Vergo. I am from the government school of the university. I want to ask you, what's your point of view regarding an article published by Dr. Repeto, Andrea Repeto, a couple of weeks ago, which said that here in Chile we needed more unions, and I think it's logical, but the University of Chicago appeals a lot to the market, and I want to see what's your view regarding unions. And of course, this under the context of today looking negatively towards unions and the ambivalence in today's world, who people who didn't live the political crisis, but it's still having effects today. Well, I would like to ask the panelists here and also the moderator, what's your opinion regarding the evolution we see in Chile of the welfare state? We've seen that in the last years, government expenditure has grown exponentially. The new government has continued with policies and plans along the same lines. Opposite to the European countries who are on the return trip, I think here, I'd like to hear what's your point of view of this and what impact could it have in the growth and development of the country. We could have a last question, which is over here, because we're kind of tight on time, and we have a cocktail to be able to talk about a lot of issues here. Well, my question is very short, but it's related to the days we live today. How could we transmit these ideas when we have a tabloid society? Because, for example, I forget. So, how do we run the decision-making process on things that you're trying to leave behind? And what's the impact of media pressure, for example, in the decision-making process? Now, regarding unions in Chile, we have freedom of unionizing here in Chile. I don't know why people say that there are barriers that prevent this or the level. If you want to join a union, you can join a union in this country. It's opposite, actually, I can tell you, of unions who have only one member. And the member, of course, is the president of the union, and he cannot be fired. Instead of more unions or unionizing, I think that we have to review the regulations, because we have several absurd examples based on them. I have negotiated with unions. It's very comfortable to negotiate with a union, and the question is if it's good for the workers. Therefore, from that point of view, I don't know how she reaches the conclusion that you need more unions in Chile. Maybe it's an ideological point of view, but from the point of view of data, you can unionize yourself whenever you want. And for the employers, it's a lot more comfortable to negotiate with a union than one by one with the employees. Now, regarding the welfare state, of course, I share your concern, because that's why I state that the crisis in Europe and what we've seen in our own realities in Chile, we have to, in a way, be concerned about the size of the state, to be more worried about what's being done and not how much money is being put into it. Because there's the amount of resources necessary for the state to carry on its production, we need to decrease that amount, and that's fundamental. Of course, there's a lot of problem when you talk about welfare state and who takes care of the sick cow if it's our cow. Regarding the tabloid society, I've always thought that probably, I remember Dubrovnik, which is a city in the Adriatic Sea, which competed against Venice. So the citizens from Dubrovnik, when they had to choose the governor or the mayor, it was to knock on the door of one of the neighbors and tell him, well, it's your turn now. And they just put him on the position and took care of his business. And for him, it was a real drag to actually take care of the job. And of course, I wish the best of luck to my colleague here on the left. I think that the problem of modern democracies is the re-election issue, and the need of being present in the media has to do with that. If they are not media personality, they're not re-elected. Therefore, maybe what we should do is prohibit re-election. And it's one idea. Maybe we should test it, or maybe a couple of times or so, not more. Now that if first I've been referenced on the road, and now about the road. Christian, I never read the article by Andrea Repeto. Now, I don't think we should promote more unions. I don't have an opinion about this, a defined opinion about this. But there's if we have to solve something, depending on the evolution of Chile for a welfare state, there's some concepts which have been a bit far, or maybe we're not agreeing. Maybe we have to talk about individual responsibility here. There is no sense of duty. Generally, you have rights, but we don't have duties here, or we don't have responsibility. And also the debates of the ideas. Our area has chosen a road to win, which has a challenge up ahead, which has to conquer certain ideas. Of course, you can attract more people to a welfare state than to a state where the responsibility is in the individual, lays on the individual. There's an ethical thing. Of course, the incentives for all of us are others. And the third is how to face this tabloid society. I think that this has to do more with a collective project, a sharing and control by peers. I want to tell you a story. When I started as running for office, I asked 5 friends to have dinner with me, to tell me all the things that my peers could not tell me in politics. Now, in politics, the collective project or sharing dreams to have a dream is forgotten. So therefore, very good people are left out of it. Good people don't go into politics. And I've had a lot of surprises. But regarding re-election, several of the new representatives signed a commitment to not be re-elected more than twice. We need more competition. The representative, the mayor, is always threatened to have someone competing against him and throwing him over. I rely more on that instead of the other mechanism. Very brief. My name is Jorge, and I want to talk about the tabloid society. Cannot be prevented, because to be able to reach your electors, your voters, you have to do this through media. But there's a thing that might be able to compensate this, and the alternative is the social networks, to be able to connect directly with the people you want to connect with in a direct way. And if the politics continues at a level of I communicate through commercials, well, that is tabloid society is the only thing that's going to work. Now, the experience of the presidential elections of the United States tells us that we can do different things, not only to win an election, but maybe beyond what you may think. For example, the health reform implemented, or the organization created around Barack Obama of volunteer citizens who persistently called the senator of their area, telling him, support this initiative. The lobby was the counterweight, the lobby by the companies, and he built a public policy in a different way. We have technologies that allow us to do this, and I think the politicians who regard this adequately, they might be able to become politicians who do not have to rely on tabloids to run for office. Now, the conflicts are not at the job site now, where Andrea took part in a commission, which the answer surprised everyone. 75% of the population, 65 to 75 of the population, was satisfied with the relationship with their employers. I don't understand what are the reasons she's giving us for this comment, but there's a consensus here. We have to achieve to flexibilize conditions for hiring and firing of people, and ensuring the income for the people. Now, I don't think this has nothing to do with unions, if there are more unions or less unions. Now, regarding public expenditure, I do have a difference of opinion here. To compete, we have to compete on a level ground. And we have here a 0.56 of social inequity compared to a standard where 1 is equal. Now, no state, a lot of states will not generate more opportunities. There are a lot of people who live with very little money here. And if we want them to develop their their human assets, we have to generate resources between all of us to help them. And I don't think that we are at that level today. Less public expenditure, maybe more expenditure. Maybe the European countries overdid it, and now they're on the way back. That's why they're on the way back. Well, thank you very much, Jorge. There are several issues and questions to cover left, but unfortunately we ran out of time. And before you leave, I want to thank the panelists, and I want to have Rodrigo de la U mention, talk on behalf of the organizers. Please, first, a round of applause for our panel here. Well, aside from this, we have a difficult task for us lawyers ahead, because we have a lot of problems to speak at the end. Second, to give good news, and then do it briefly, which is a very professional challenge for anybody. We have good news. Ideas in action is the motto of our university, and we want to announce the formation of the Chicago Alumni Club in Chile. We have total support from the university. Corporately, it's going to be organized through two organizations, a committee board, where we'll have former students, and an executive committee, which is going to be organized by the different schools of the university. Now, we want to ensure the overall representation of all the graduates of the university from the different schools. It's a great challenge, and it's based on four main goals. In the first place, we want to support the admission process and to ensure at a national level the adequate publishing of the image of the college, and also tell about the professional and academic activity. Second, to facilitate to become a connection organization for the alumni of the university, and to create networks which generate support for the new graduates, which ensures the growth of Chicago within Chile, which supports their alumni and their students, and is able to have an influence on the decision-making process in the country. And fourth, last but not least, to ensure the status of a foundation for the organization within Chile, so we're able to consolidate the possibility of running fundraising activities, to be able to project the support to potential scholarships to future students of the university. I'll at last tell you that our immediate step are going to be to draft this committee board and draft the regulations or statutes which will give shape to this dream. And I know we're going to transfer to you the strength we have to run this project, and like the University of Chicago showed us or taught us, looking in the future and placing good ideas in the service of Chile. Thank you very much. As a closing statement, I would like to have Ryan Paulson from the university to help me to give a gift to our panel members.
Well, thank you so much for welcoming us to Chile. It's been a joy for me to work with these amazing volunteers. Thank you again to our panel. The Alumni Association is so excited about the warmth in this room, and I think it's fair for me to speak on behalf of my colleague Jim Wiedemann, who many of you know as well from the Booth School, and who are so pleased can join us tonight to say that we've always felt very welcome and have been so energized by the enthusiasm of our alumni community in Chile. So thank you to all of you, and we hope that you'll support our alumni club. And I would be remiss if I did not add very quickly that there are many connections between the University of Chicago and Chile. We have faculty here often from the Physical Sciences Department who are studying astronomy and astrophysics in Chile. We have partnerships with Harris. So we hope to have many more exciting events to come on a variety of topics, and we hope to have your support for those as well. And so thank you. And finally, if I could just close by giving a few gifts to our wonderful panel. We're most grateful for them and very appreciative. And please join us for a cocktail reception in the room on the left, and we'll celebrate together. So many, many thanks. Thank you.
Una última cosa.
A last comment. once Ryan finishes delivering the presents, we will also want to.
Que ha sido la que ha dado
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you very much.